Well, welcome back to another episode. And I'm here with Dan as always. Hey, Dan.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, so we're on our second label review, and I'm super
Yes,
excited.
we
I
are.
love doing these, by the way. I don't know if you do, but I love them.
I do. I love doing it too. I think it's great. I think it's
Yeah,
like it's something that I wish somebody would do for other products that I buy. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like, there's plenty of
exactly.
things that I would love if somebody who's like spends their life in this stuff could tell me like how my deodorant compares against like some other
Right?
brands'
Yeah,
deodorant.
and put it to the test. Exactly.
But I'll tell
So,
you what. Here's the
mhm.
thing. We blew an opportunity with this episode. And we film this stuff long in advance. We plan out what we're going to shoot long in advance. So we knew what product we were doing for this episode a long
Mhm.
time ago. But if we hadn't, what I should be doing, since I'm being filmed right now as I sit in Oslo, Norway, I should have bought a bag of food from from a store in Oslo, and we could have talked about the difference in the label, like the basically the regulatory side of it. Like what do you have to put on the bag in terms of telling people what ingredients and what nutrition and all that stuff is in there. And so we missed a trick there, but
Hey,
we're
if
just
you
gonna
got room in
it's
your
gonna
suitcase, there's still time. There's
okay.
still
It's a good
time.
point. It's a good
So,
point.
but we'll put it for the maybe a future episode. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I
But
think it'd be
for
cool.
today's episode, at least, we're sticking with an American brand, not European, but we're doing Sundays. And for those that are watching, and we'll walk through everything that I'll be sharing visually. We're doing Sundays, the chicken recipe. So I went on their website and I did buy a small bag. I think they call it a box actually. So a small box of their chicken recipe. So it's a cute little packaging. I do have to shout out their marketing real quick. It even comes with like a Sunday's newspaper. Like, oh my gosh, so creative.
It's a good looking brand for
It's
sure.
just such a great branding opportunity that they're kind of, versioning their food in. So here's kind of the basic layout that it ships in a box, and then it has a box of the food, and then it has the bag in there. So what I noticed, sorry for the crinkling ASMR opportunity here, but it does come in a bag. It's just like this little clear bag.
So it's
Um,
like what it looks like to me is like what cereal, like a box of cereal comes
It
in. There's
does.
like
It
the
almost looks like
rec
cinnamon toast crunch slash beef jerky. So it's different, right? So this is a very different. We'll kind of get into, the ingredients still make it a certain type of food, but they're trying to get away from kind of this kibble analogy. They're
right.
trying to go for like a different texture, different type of dog food. But anyway, so it.
So let me just jump in because I can
Yeah.
see you, and I think some people, if somebody's just listening, what you're showing us is like there's a rectangular box that's like the same size as like
Yes.
a box of cereal, and then you open up, and how much is that box? It was
Yep.
seventy
So
five
let's
dollars.
Yeah, so this was $75 and this was for, let's make sure my camera's focusing. So it was for 36 ounces, 1.02 kilograms.
Okay.
So not a lot of food. And
Yeah,
then yeah,
that's what I was gonna say.
yeah.
Is you can really see it if you're on the video episode here. It's like inside the cardboard rectangle box. When you
Mhm.
open that up, there's a sealed plastic bag,
Yep.
and that contains the actual food product. And it looks like maybe like a fifth of the bag. Like if they just sold this in the bag without the box, you'd be like, oh come on.
Yeah, right.
You
Like
know what I mean? Like
yeah.
there's the fact that the box is big is like, oh, okay, there's a lot of food in here. But when you like hold up that bag again, like it's just
Yeah.
like there's
It,
not. You haven't. Have you taken anything out of that?
I haven't taken anything out of it. This is
Yeah, it's
like freshly opened just before this episode. Yeah, it's very jarring. That
like
was
an
one thing
eighth.
I really
My
noticed.
best guess is about an eighth of that bag
Yeah.
has kibble in it. And so
Yeah.
like for a frame of reference, it's 1.02 kilograms. You said.
Yeah, 1.02. Yep.
Okay, so that's what the
Mhm.
product looks like. So
Yep.
1.02 kilograms is less than 10% of how much is in our, like in Keto Natural, we sell two sizes. And we sell a 24-pound bag and a 4.2-pound bag. And so 24 pounds works out to 11 point something kilograms.
Right.
So you're talking about less than 10% as much food as is in our bag. So it's not a lot in there, and they don't make like like you said, when you get
Mhm.
into the specific like label claims and the like branding and stuff, you can talk about the kibble, But it's like, yeah, they're definitely trying to be like, we're very different from Kibble. Look at how we
Yeah.
box it
Yeah, look at
and
how we box
package
it,
it.
look at the shape, all of like yeah, it definitely stands out as a different experience. This does not feel like a standard Kibble in terms of branding, in terms of the shape, in terms of everything. But yes, in terms of the actual like weight and the price I paid for it, yeah, it is jarring. Like, oh, okay, hopefully I get my money's worth.
So that's
Um,
the, yeah, all right, you go. Because like,
yeah. Yeah, we'll kind of
there's a
slide
lot to
into a
say.
couple of like, yeah, offshoots of that. But so things that stood out to me in terms of like what's on the box, what are they calling out? And I would say very effectively in terms of the copy that they're using. The branding is very simple, but it's very even in the, like this little paper, it's like our pets are now, they sleep in our beds, they don't sleep outside anymore. They're like, they have more Instagram followers than us. So it's just, it feels very modern, very light. And, but they are doing some claims on their packaging. So let's talk about it. One, on the front and throughout their website, they do use this term called AirDried, which we'll get into what that specifically means, but they're trying to position themselves differently than what they're calling a hot extrusion for Kibble. So I'll let Dan, because Dan's an expert on that, so I'll let him walk through. So I'll just kind of hit up a couple more things that stood out to me on the back of the packaging. So that is, they go on to the gentle air dried, and what they're saying is that's for maximum nutrition, flavor, and ease. And then they say we use only human grade ingredients. So that's like a number one bullet point that they use not only on their packaging, but on their website. Made with 100% real human grade ingredients. Two, all natural, known synthetic additives. And then three, and then they really kind of harp up on, just like every other Kibble, is ready to eat, no prep, fridge or cleanup required. So to me, that's kind of calling out the more of like maybe some raw dog food or fresh food. Like they're kind of really kind of going back to, this is maximum nutrition, maximum flavor, because we're gentle air drying it, but it's still so easy. Like you just pull this open from your pantry, dump it in a bowl, and your dog can eat it. So I think it's really good. Let's kind of jump into what these claims are. And
Let me
I
just say,
yeah.
before, like, it's super, this is not me telling you what it says on the label, but I'll give you the context around like how this
Yep.
brand kind of came to be. So before there was Sundays, and to a lesser degree, before there was Keto Natural, it was closer. Like I think we were founded before Sundays, but before there was either of us, there was a round of startup pet food companies that all kind of came about at the same time. And they are like the Farmer's Dog, Nom Nom Now, Ollie. And all of them shared a couple things in common. Number one is they only sold direct to consumer. So if you want the product, you go on their website, you buy it, and they ship it directly to you. Number two is that they're not dried pet food. They're fresh or raw. So you're talking about stuff that will spoil. It is not shelf stable. Okay? And all these guys kind of sold under similar-ish brands. The same kind of language got used a lot. And basically, the core of the substantive thing that made it different was, one, we're going to ship it directly to you. And two, it's going to be fresh or raw. Usually you've got to buy Kibble from the store because it's a huge pain in the neck. You can't, like, your pet food store, if you just put Ollie on the shelf, it spoils. It has to be refrigerated. It has to be, so like shipping direct to a consumer in this like day and age of Amazon or whatever, you can do that. You can put enough like coolant in individual boxes that you can get it out to people and get them fresh dog food. They got to put it in their fridge or freezer or whatever once they get it. But that was the main difference, was like, we're going to ship it to you and it's going to be fresh or raw. And then they also kind of like, as a matter of course, used a lot of the same like buzzwords as each other. Like, everybody tries to make it like our product is the end all be all. Like there's a lot of like soft marketing claims that don't really mean anything, but you describe it really well, the health halo.
Yeah.
And these are like all natural. That one kind of means something, but like not much. And there are other, kind of stuff that's like that. And so like that same kind of language that everybody used kind of became synonymous with this breed of, no pun intended, of dog food startup. They all kind of were the same thing. And then once they kind of had some degree of success, Sundays, and there's another brand that's called Spot and Tango, and it's basically similar story. They came up somewhat later. Spot and Tango existed as a different company at first, but they rebranded as Spot and Tango. And Sundays basically said, we're going to do the direct-to-consumer thing. We're going to do the same health halo and the same language, but we're going to cook it. It's going to be shelf stable, and we're going to try to have it both ways, basically. Like, we're going to try to charge prices and make claim and use language that's consistent with like the raw diets of Farmer's Dog and Ollie and whatever.
Right.
And we're going to ship it directly to people, and we're going to brand it similarly to these other products, color and feel, and a nice newspaper in there and whatever. But at the end of the day, we're going to be selling them a shelf-stable product, the kind of thing you can put it in a cereal box, put it on the shelf, and it stays there just fine. It doesn't spoil like these raw diets do. And they're testing whether that's a thing, whether you can basically have it both ways. You can convince people that, well, it is a dried, shelf-stable product, but we make it's our own special kind of that. So it's worth because we'll get into the pricing, and like, holy cow, it is like knock you over the head, serious. Like, it's a ton of money. So yeah. That's the background. That's like kind of like, seems to me where that's like how the trends evolved in the industry and where this fits within that, you know?
Yeah. To me, they're selling definitely, it's almost like, it's like a health halo on one hand, but it's like a lifestyle. Like, don't you want your dogs to have lightly air dried food? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different type of cooking, but it's made and it's elevated to this like pillar of health. Like, we damage less of the ingredients while doing so. And, you don't want your dog to eat kibble that's been cooked to like this temperature. And we'll get into the very like math and the science behind that, because I think it's much less damaging than most people think. It's not, the traditional kibble isn't blasted at 800 degrees. And they use a lot of, which we'll show their website in a second for those that are watching on video, but they use like this old style fan as kind of the symbol of, it's just so light, air dried, and it's gentle.
Right.
And so, it kind of sells into that price point of, oh, well, if you're doing all this work and you're doing a different cooking process, maybe I am willing to pay a little bit different, a higher price for that. But anyway, I think we should start with air dried. I think that's
I mean, it feels like, so there are like three things that substantively make this product different from a kibble, a garden variety, call it Blue Buffalo type of kibble.
Right.
What's different is not the nutritional content. If you look at the like how much protein, how much fat, how many calories, how much of the various vitamins and minerals, there's nothing unique about this. It's I think 38% protein. Maybe queue up that part of the, like while I'm talking, you can pull up that part of the website and check that. But it's something like that, 38% protein.
Yeah.
Right? Is that right? I'm sorry, I'm like sticking my.
Yeah, none of this is one way or the other. It's not like a super high protein diet, all meat, but it's not super, I mean, it's very middle of the road and with everything. So it's very standard.
Yeah, it's like there are definitely products with less protein than this for sure. Like if you go into the like kind of Hills Purina category, you're going to find plenty of their stuff that's lower. But like I said, it's like Blue Buffalo Wilderness. Like that was the first one we did on this show, and the numbers there are pretty darn similar.
Yeah.
So the numbers aren't very unique. What's unique are the three things that stick out to me are the air dried concept, the human grade ingredients, and the no synthetic vitamins. All of the nutritional content comes from whole food sources, no synthetic vitamins. And so those are three things that are unquestionably, well, I don't know about exactly, like we'll get into like the air dried and like what it is and isn't, but those are three things that like I can't say about Ketona, and Blue Buffalo can't say about Blue Wilderness. The human grade ingredients is a real substantive thing. It has to do with basically where the, like, what kind of factory, who's regulating the kind of factory. There are some types of factories that make dog food that are regulated by, primarily by the USDA, which is like responsible for the like big chunks of the US food system on like the agriculture side. And so traditionally, makers of kibble, your factory had to pass like health and safety stuff that's not the same as somebody packing meat for human consumption.
Right.
And so and I'm not 100% certain on this, but I think that like that round of startups that we were talking about before, the like
Yeah.
Farmer's Dog, those guys, I think that was the first round of folks being like human grade. This is the thing, we're going to make our stuff in facilities that are going to pass the FDA's same standards as are required out of producers that make human foods. And so that's like I said, I can't say that. Blue Buffalo can't say that, and these guys can. But it's important to note that there's no, like, I get why somebody would hear that and be like, yeah, I want that. And that's, I respect that decision. But you can't make that decision without noting also that there's never been an iota of evidence there's anything better about it, anything safer. There's no less likely to be recalled or more likely to be recalled on one side or the other. No more likely to be contaminated on one side or the other. There's no health benefit that's been demonstrated on one side or the other. And not like demonstrated like there's holes in the scientific record. Like there's not one study that remotely says anything close to that. So it's all like yeah, but it still sounds better. Like I'm sure that the factory that's used to make my personal food is going to be better in some respects than the dog food factory. And so if that's what you feel, then this is a product that will provide that benefit. No doubt about it. And the same is kind of true with the synthetic vitamins thing. It's like really similar story. That's a real difference, right? Again, and it's probably something, I don't have the Blue Buffalo label in front of me, but I'll dollars to donuts, you know, just like us, they put like multivitamin supplement in their recipe as well. It's like there's the nutritional profiles that every maker of pet food in the country has to meet if they want to sell their product as what's called complete and balanced, are like extensive. And they say basically, you got to make sure that your product has this much vitamin A, this much vitamin D, blah, 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 all that stuff. And one of the ways that's like a most surefire way to make sure that you hit that is to use like what essentially amounts to like a multivitamin, like the same, like a Centrum type thing, but that's in powdered form instead of like pill form, like you take it home every day and you mix it into the recipe, and it like ensures that everything matches up with what's required. And so it's long been kind of an industry standard thing.
Yeah.
Just like human grade feels, even though there's no evidence, it feels like better. There's like, you can build a diet, a pet food diet, and meet those nutritional requirements without using a multivitamin mixture, like 100%. Of course you can. It's more difficult, and there's a process involved that's like, you have to, I am not saying that any individual brand is deviating from what they're putting on the label, but there's like a much greater degree of variability that you have to iron out. Like imagine if you're mixing in sweet potato and like grapes and strawberries and pulling all the vitamin mineral content from there. There's variability in those things. They're not like you can just measure out a teaspoon of them. They're like individual unitized things, and there's more variability. But assuming you get it all right, that's still, it's like that's another way you can meet those profiles. And again, there's no evidence anywhere that says if you give a dog whole, like these vitamins from natural as opposed to synthetic sources, that it's healthier for the dog, that there's any kind of like difference within the body, material difference within how the body deals with it. But it does feel better.
Yeah.
It does feel better.
It feels good. Like I want my dog, of course I would want them to, thinking of the, like you said, like the actual ingredients have been mixed in with the meat, and that just makes it feel so much better. Like, oh, of course I don't want something made in a lab, but you're right. There's been no study or science around the nutritional impact of synthetic versus whole, but also the human grade versus food grade cooking process and the actual where they're made. Like there's no impact on nutrition. And I think, yeah, it's definitely becomes like a branding impact, I think, at that point.
And
Like,
it
of course,
works. It's
yeah,
like
it's obviously working.
I eat. I'm somebody that happens to believe that for my own nutrition, a good pillar like of how I think about what I should eat is I should eat a lot of most of my calories from protein. I should get a
Right.
lot of protein. I do a lot of muscle stuff, and I should eat a lot of protein. And so one of the best ways for me to do that, most convenient ways, is I eat protein bars. And they contain 20 grams of protein per bar, and they're 200 calories per bar. So like nutritional content from my perspective is fantastic. My girlfriend, when she sees them, like always rolls right. Like when she talks to people about what I eat, is always like, "Oh my god, he eats these nutrition bars, these protein bars," and I'm like, "What is the what? I don't understand." And she's like, "Well, it's just all synthetic." And it's like, well, okay, so what are you saying about that? What in what way is that different? And there's no real there, but it's just like it basically boils down to this feeling of like it just feels different. It's not the same as like a whole food, and I feel that way too. I feel that difference too. But at the end of the day, it's like I overcome that in my thinking about what's best for me to eat. Yeah. And so,
exactly.
and it's sort of like that with the synthetic vitamins. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's not that it's never been studied, like whether synthetic vitamins, it's not like we're trying to say like, well, nobody studied either one of these. And so you're rolling the dice one way or the other. It's like dogs absolutely do absorb synthetics. Nobody's proven there's any kind of difference in health outcomes when it comes to if you give dogs synthetic produced vitamins or naturally produced ones.
Yeah, I agree. Great discussion on, human grade versus the synthetic vitamins, which they kind of use as these other pillars in their branding. And let's circle back to this AirDried because there's so many good points in it. And I'm so excited to kind of hear more because you work behind the scenes as a CEO of a pet food company that makes the traditional kibble, so to speak. Even though we're kind of in this midst of suddenly kibble's bad and you don't want to feed them something that's, been cooked to death. I know that's used a lot in the industry of these people that are not just air dried, but gently cooked is another phrase that's kind of floating up in other startups. But yeah, let's kind of walk through what air dried means, but also comparing it. I think it's very important to compare it to the traditional process that Kibble normally goes.
Yeah. Ton to say on this. So again, I'll start with the kind of context, the like larger industry context. Once upon a time, there were, to some degree, you could get pet food in two varieties. There are two of the ways you could get pet food. This is the accurate way to say it. Two of the more common ways you could get it was by far the most common way was kibble. And one of the other more common ways was raw. And raw, guys, this is circa 1990s. The raw ones are smaller companies. So all the biggest companies make kibble products primarily. And the raw guys start producing their products. Kibble, until Keto Natural Pet Foods came along, was believed, it's always been the case, you use a lot of carbohydrate to make it, okay? And it's like basically like making a loaf of bread. Like you have to use starch, not have to because we don't, but like people have long believed like, no, that's a necessary ingredient. If you don't put enough carbohydrate in there, the dough doesn't hold together. You can't make kibble. So the vast majority of kibbles, tons of carbohydrate in them. Raw diets come along. You don't have to make them like kibble. You don't have to heat up the dough and get it all to stick together like a loaf of bread.
Loaf of bread, right?
It's just raw. It's just raw ingredients, and so many of them don't contain carbohydrate. Dogs start eating these new generation of raw products and are observably healthier, okay? Leaner, most notably, and they develop like a big following. And they basically just like, they kind of got it wrong is my judgment of what happened. It's like what became the fixation. There are two big differences between these two classes of products. One is whether or not they're cooked. So are they raw or are they not raw? And the other is what's the composition? What kind of nutrients, what kind of ingredients are in there? And that was really different too, because there are no, and basically I think the industry just gravitated around the rawness and said basically like the consumers came to believe that it was the rawness in and of itself that was what was the like magic elixir for their dog. Not the fact you just take carbohydrates out of the diet as a completely different nutritional makeup. And so what that means is that raw became a like another way of saying like magically healthy, basically. Like that represents like its own class of like
Yeah, it was
super
like a
healthy.
magic bullet, like feed them raw. And yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so now what you start seeing are folks, like I said, the way that it feels like Sunday is like trying to have it both ways. They're making a product that is cooked, that is dehydrated, that is shelf stable. It's carbohydrate heavy. You can hold you're showing like the camera
Yeah.
actual, it's not like balls, it's like square, it's like flat stuff that's still the same kind of like consistency, right? Like it's like
Yeah, when you break it apart, like if it's not in the existence of these strips that are, it seems like they're extruded strips that are still broken apart into these little squares. But yeah, when you break it apart, it still is like kibble inside in terms of the dryness, in terms of the texture. It's like the final product that's extruded as these flat pieces versus a ball or a square shape, or the different traditional kibble shapes.
And so basically, one of the things that it feels like what they're trying to do is trying to be like, look, we're going to try to use as many of the raw-ish buzzwords as possible, even though we're not selling a raw product. We've got a product here that is shelf stable, that's been heated up, make the bacteria go away, suck the moisture out of it, all the same things that happens with kibble, but we're going to try to find a way to frame this so that it's not kibble. Like that's kind of like something that came out of the raw versus kibble dichotomy. Is it was like raw magic bullet, kibble bad, basically. And so now you've got these brands that are coming along that are trying to get the health halo, but they're like, and so one of the ways they're doing that is like kibble bad, but really you look at it and you like start to tick off like what's in it, how it's made and whatever, and it's like, no, this is basically 95% of the way to kibble. This is not a raw diet. It's like completely different. This is basically the same thing. And so the like prime example of that is their use of this expression that's very vague, gently air dried. You see it all over their marketing materials, and they on their website, you can pull up the like they've got the very simple write-up of how their process works, and it's stepwise. It's like mix the ingredients together, and then gently air dried is just like picture of some nuggets under a fan, under like a fan. And I mean, nobody needs me to tell you that like when you're producing pet food at scale, that is not what's going on. Like you could just imagine like how many of these boxes are in the United States right now. So you start to ask yourself like, but here's how kibble is made. You take all the ingredients that you're going to use in it and you mix them together with you add water to it basically. And the ingredients all like dough. It's just like think meaty biscuits, meaty bread, basically. Like you make a dough. And then what's different than in bread is you extrude, you squeeze basically. Like extrude means it's like what you like, oh, this is perfect. This is like some kind of lotion that is sitting on my counter. And another word for squeezing the material out the nozzle is extrude. That is what extrusion is. It's like squeezing out through a nozzle. And that's why kibble all has the like shape that it does. Is they have like these factory tooling has like tons of these little nozzles basically. And so it's got a blade that's running really sharp or really fast. And as you push all the dough out these like think of a pasta maker. You know what I mean? Like it's getting pushed out through the nozzles and then it's getting cut over and over again. So it's not like pasta where it's like cutting once every 12 inches or whatever. It's just like really rapidly chunking it out into little balls. So when it comes out of that, it's been mixed together, it's been heated up, and it's been pushed out through the little nozzle into little balls. And when you're testing it, like when we were going in the early days, our challenge was like, could we get the dough to hold together without the carbohydrate? And so what you do is you're like standing at that point, you're like picking them off the line. And they're still soft. They still contain all the moisture, but they're in their little balls, basically. The ingredients have all been mixed together. And so you can pick them off the line. The guys are like real hardcore, like pet food dudes who've been like doing it forever will eat it. They're like,
Okay.
and they can like, they know whether or not something is right or wrong and how much moisture or what temperature or whatever.
Right.
And so then that's not shelf stable, because
Mhm.
basically the issue is like it has too much water in it. Like that's why an orange will rot and a dried orange will not. Is
Right.
like
Moisture
things that
content.
spoil have water in them
Right.
is the thing. That's kind of the way it is. And so when you buy a raw pet food product, meat is heavily moist. You know, your body is whatever percent moisture. And it's like cow's body is the same thing. Chicken's body is the same thing. A lot of moisture in it.
Right.
And it's the same with like fresh vegetables and fruits. And it's the same in kibble that's just finished the extruding bit of the whole process. And so the second step, the other big step, is you dry them out. You put them through an oven and you blow air over it. And between the heat and the air, it dries them out. It pulls out most of the moisture and it goes through a long conveyor belt and just like goes one through the other and eventually comes out the other end. And by the time it comes out the other end, a lot of the moisture is gone. Something like 10% is all that remains. And
Right.
boom, now you've got something you can sell. And during that process, in our case, okay, and we do nothing special manufacturing. We have a special
Yeah,
product.
it's very traditional. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. We have a
Mhm.
very special product nutritionally, substantively. But in
Right.
terms of the manufacturing, absolutely nothing special. I don't believe there's any benefit to doing it any different way. And so I will
Right.
tell you straight up, it's like exactly the same as Blue Buffalo. And what that means is basically you heat it up as hot as like your kitchen oven on medium. It gets to like 300 degrees. Okay? So it's like, think about roasting a chicken breast. Think about roasting a piece of salmon. It's like the vast majority of things that I'm cooking in my oven are hotter than that. You know, when you cook salmon, it's at 400 degrees. When I cook chicken breast, it's at 400 degrees. There are times I have a big green egg smoker that I like to use to smoke pork shoulder or like brisket.
Sure.
And in order to do that well, you do it much lower temperature. You put it like 225 and you just let it chill all day.
Mhm.
And it does some unique things to the consistency of it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I mean, like if you want to, you know, like kitchen oven is not stressing itself to get to 300. Like it's just like not that high a temperature.
A very average temperature. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like
Like a low medium.
here's the thing. It's like, think about this. It's like these, if it gets too hot, things burn. Meat products burn.
Yeah.
Like think about if I'm running it through if I'm running my conveyor belt through the drying process where it's going to put some heat and some air across it in order to pull the moisture out. I can't make it like the temperature of the sun in there because it burns and it becomes blackened. And like, that's not what this is. This is drying it out. This is like not the process of like, doesn't need to be cooked anymore. Like
Right.
and so anyway. So I say all that to give the listener a good sense of what the garden variety kibble process looks like. So to compare it against what is being implied here, because it's really important to know, it's like they don't talk about what they mean by gently air dried. Like it is unquestionably the case that they are doing the same fundamental two things to dry out their mixture as we are, which is like they're pushing air, blowing air across it, and they're heating it up, like putting it in a hotter environment. And I think generally speaking, what the idea is, like the concept of air dried is not that is, I think we could basically say that too. What, you know, there's nothing that is drying the product except for air. It's just hot air, or it's air that's blowing across the
Right.
product. That's all that's happening here. And it's the same two things that they're doing. They're applying, you know, they're blowing air across it and they're heating up the temperature of that air. Same
Yeah.
two things everybody's doing. And so it's kind of just like the word gently is carrying a lot of water here, and they don't specify exactly what it means, but the implication is we're going lower. We're not going to heat it up as much as a kibble manufacturer is, therefore it's better.
Yeah. And I think from like a fact point, they're really harboring on this. We're maximizing nutrition. We're not lowering any nutritional content by doing so versus hot extrusion. So I think that's interesting because, you touched on it at the top of this episode, is there's no scientific study out there that shows that exact claim in terms of lowering.
There's an even more persuasive point. Okay. Here's what they say in places on the ingredients, like we air dry it, which means that the nutrients don't get messed up. Basically, is what the way they say it. They're just
Right.
like when you put it through hot extrusion, then it messes up all the nutrients, and they're no longer nutrients anymore, and your dog can't. It's not good for your dog.
Right.
And it's like the better point. You're right. There is no evidence that that happens to a material degree. There's like you can find evidence of minor changes in a couple of things, and they're like the most. It's not related to how healthy your dog is, but that's like secondary. The main point is I will tell you how we figure out what the nutritional content of our product is, and what we tell you on the label. It is this:
Right.
we cook it, we'd send it through all of the machines, including the hot extrusion, and then we send it off to the lab for nutritional analytics, and then they tell us how much of the various nutrients are in there. So if the idea is, well, you put it through the hot thing, and therefore, like, you made your steak medium, and if you had made it rare, it would have been healthier. Like, even if that was the case, that's all. Like, I'm telling you what's in it after all that is done. And so it makes, it's just like, what is the game called? Like a sleight of hand thing, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like,
Really
it's a
interesting.
process that's
Yeah.
not described. And honestly, I know there's like a critical tone here because I am critical of some of this. Some of this feels like pulling the wool over people's eyes and kind of unfairly trying to compete. But if anyone from Sundays is hearing this, they say we were founded by a veterinarian and an engineer, couldn't find the perfect food for their own dogs, they decided to make it. I welcome being told that I'm misunderstanding any elements of this process, and I promise you that we will speak to you respectfully, apologize if we get out of line, and talk about this like two adults and professionals, no problem. But I'm pretty confident in what we're saying about how this process works. It's not, if it was like, again, think about the scale, think about the fundamental pieces that are involved, heat and blowing air over it. And think about what comes out the other end, what's going into the bag. It's a dried out like mixture of ingredients. In their case, it's been cut, like you said. It's like you can see in the case of Kibble, it gets squeezed out through a tube and cut into little nubs. Theirs is this very thin, whatever, like a eighth of an inch thick mixture, and you could see it definitely been like spread flat and then chopped into little squares. Right? Like it's just different. It's making it different. So what you get are these little pieces of Cinnamon Toast Crunch instead of little balls.
Yeah. As a pet food consumer, if air dried, was this truly like fundamental game changer? I would expect to see something like when we air dry our food, we preserve X more protein or something that is very A plus B equals C, but it's not. When you look at, and we'll kind of jump into this next, of the guaranteed analysis and the calorie content, nothing's really changing. It's just more of, maybe it impacts like density, the way that their food's made. And then it depends on if you're swayed by the no synthetic vitamin claim. But at the end of the day, the numbers are still the numbers. It's, it's not like the air dried is impacting the nutrition outright. So yeah, it's just a very, it's just,
It's also you can feel when it's your intuition that's operating and telling you like, yeah, but it does feel healthier. It's like, just think about the steak analogy. It's like nobody goes, I always eat my steak rare because that's the best nutritional content. That's not a thing. You know what I mean? It's like there is no difference between if it is cooked to medium rare, if it's cooked to medium. There's like, the product changes unquestionably, but material changes in the amount of nutrition that's being supplied such that the numbers that are being reported are no longer the real numbers is complete BS.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting before we move on is we did find, just like to compare the numbers, because we haven't mentioned any numbers yet, is on Sunday's website, they're saying the air dried, just to give some definition to that, is 140 degrees to 180. And I think you had mentioned in our prep for this episode that traditional Kibble goes through about 350 degrees. Like you mentioned, like a at-home oven, like you're just turning it on to like a very medium temperature. It's not being blasted 600 degrees, in this huge industrial oven. It's being on a conveyor belt with warm air basically going over it. So,
Hot. I mean, it's hot, but 180
yeah,
degrees is pretty, like, you can't, none of
right.
us can be, like, we were in the sauna out here in Norway the other day, and that gets, I don't know, 120 degrees, and then it becomes intolerably hot. Like,
Yeah.
180 degrees is hot, but it's so is an oven, at 300-degree oven.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to say that it's not hot. I'm trying to say it's not different. It's just
Right.
like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
anyway,
think when I used to dehydrate a lot of my food back in the day, it's akin to a dehydrator that you would have at home. It's just like this warm air, but it's still, there's still heat involved. It's not, like truly air dried in terms of it sitting out at 72-degree room and
no,
cold.
yeah,
It,
exactly. It's still too
so
hot
anyway,
for a human being to be in there for any length
correct.
of time.
Yeah, and I think
So
it's just
like,
important to define this as we go through it, just so everyone can understand the comparison that we're making for in defining their true cooking process versus traditional kibble. So,
yeah, it's like
and
there is when I love smoking pork shoulder and beef brisket, and it's so delicious, and it's a great thing to do for a barbecue to have people over Memorial Day coming up. But there is no part of my mind that's like, when you cook it that way, then it's healthier than
right,
just grilling a steak for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, no, no, no. It's tasty because all the, like, if you cook it really slow, all the connective tissue like liquefies instead of, and it's like, it's tasty,
yeah,
but
it's
it's
a
not
more
like
tender
you're like,
product.
oh, that's the only healthy way to do it is low and slow forever, and it's much healthier. Like, go talk to a barbecue guy or two and talk to me about like who's
Right. They're
healthy in
not
that community.
having, right. The barbecue kings are not sitting around having nutrition content discussions. It's more of the end product and the
Yeah,
tenderizing
yeah,
of the meat. But
that's
anyway,
right.
now I'm really hungry.
I know. All right. So then so we've been doing it for almost 45 minutes now. There's one other point. And the
Yes.
other point is this. Is like I was saying before, it's like the way they're trying to frame it is a very kibbly product in the sense that it's the nutritional content is very kibbly. Three big differences. I mean, three differences. Material substantive differences.
Yeah.
Human grade factory versus USDA factory. Synthetic or no synthetic, and air dried versus traditional kibble preparation.
Hmm.
But the nutrition garden variety,
Yeah.
what you will pay for it will blow your mind. Like, it is legit. We had to double check the decimal point on it because it's like, what? So, like I said before, we sell expensive kibble. The most problematic thing for us is that people are like, I would love to feed your product, but I can't afford it.
Right.
And it's, that's just what it costs if you're going to put a lot of meat. Like, here's a dirty little secret of the pet food industry that probably 8 out of 10 people listening to this already know. Costs a lot. A calorie of meat costs a lot more than a calorie of vegetable, and a calorie of cereal product, like a kind of like corn or wheat or potato. And so if you're going to put a lot of meat in there, it's going to cost you more to make it, and you got to have to pass more of that cost on to the consumer. So when we sell a 24-pound bag of chicken recipe ketona, it's $112. It's a lot more than Blue Buffalo, for instance. When you buy Sundays, you're only paying $75. That sounds good. That's less than 112. It's like,
But wait,
okay,
there's more.
yeah. So what you get, the dimensions, the volume of the box
Yeah.
is maybe like a third of the volume of our air sealed 24-pound bag of kibble.
Right.
But the amount of product in there is less than 10% of the amount of kibble in our 24-pound bag. Okay?
Yeah.
It's 1 kilogram versus whatever 24 pounds works out to in kilograms, something like 11 or 12. Okay? Less than 10%. And like I said, the calorie content, they report 500 calories per cup. Our chicken recipes, 450 calories per cup. This is different. It's not that different, okay? It's like you said that when they're feeding directions for your dog are you end up getting the same, like if you plug in her weight to Keto Naturals feeding recommendations, you get
Yeah,
the same amount, same
same
volume, same
amount.
number of
Yep.
cups.
For 10
So,
pounds. Yep.
and
Hmm.
maybe that doesn't hold for every size dog. Maybe when you get up to larger dogs, like they
Could
round
be.
up and it's a little
Right.
different. But it's like, and totally might be like you're gonna feed, if yeah. So I got Saint Bernards, right? Like they're gonna feed
Right.
10% less volume, right? Because I contain 10% less calories per cup than they do, something
Hmm.
like that. But I'm talking about a product that their bag is 10, not percent, 10 times, 1,000% less product.
Yeah.
So if you were to buy 24 pounds of Sunday's chicken recipe for the equivalent of 24 pounds of ketona, you would be paying something like $800. Okay? $800. And that is not a misprint. Think
Yeah.
about that. And like I said, it is not the case that there's nothing different about the product. Nope. There are different things. They're just minor. It's really, those things are not things that have science says this is better and you pay for it, but it's better. And if you're willing to do anything for your dog, you do it. It's like, no, these are things where it's like, it feels good. And maybe some people are like, yeah, even if there's not evidence, I still want to do it because it's just like I bet, even despite the
Right.
lack of evidence, they probably haven't studied it well enough yet, and I bet it's going to be shown eventually. I get it, totally
Right.
fair. But I'm talking like you will be paying 8 times as much. You'll be paying roughly, and this is where it all kind of comes back to, is like I said, they're trying to have it both ways. They're trying to do branding, pricing, language, feel of the raw delivery companies, but they're going to do it while they're only making shelf stable. You know, they don't. This is make a big fuss about not being kibble. Okay, it's dried out mixture of beef and chicken and other ingredients that gets dried out and cut into a
Yeah.
different
Not to
shape.
mention the protein content in and of itself, which we have a really
Exactly.
good episode on how much
Exactly.
protein is 38%, which I'll
It's
let you
not
kind of
bad.
explain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad. Like I said, it's blue wilderness. It's not great. It's just it's not bad, but it's not much. It's probably they don't specify the amount of carbohydrate in here. I'm sure it's about 25%.
Yeah.
Okay? So
Yeah.
like, you could switch from them to us and if you did that, you will be getting a synthetic product or not synthetic product. They're all but we put a multivitamin in ours, they don't.
Right.
We'd make ours in a USDA inspected facility, not an FDA inspected one. So it doesn't qualify as human grade.
Yeah.
And we use garden variety extrusion processing, not whatever they are doing when they call it gently air dried. However, we will give you more protein and less carbohydrate. We will give you more meat based amino acids, essential amino acids. And we will do it for roughly 1/8 of the price. And we'll give you 80% less carbohydrate. And
Yeah.
it's like the substance. So I guess this just kind of is like a long-winded way of saying like this is a really good example of how a lot of pet food is marketed in the US in a way that's like damaging in terms of public health. It's just like there's a big
Yeah.
focus on issues that don't have an evidentiary basis. And the pricing reflects stuff that's like not grounded in evidence. And so people get focused on the wrong stuff and get a nation of really unhealthy dogs. But
Yeah, I agree. I think that
digress.
was a really great summary of the purpose of these label reviews. It's not to villainize one type of food, one brand, any particulars. It's just really breaking it down of do these claims have any type of evidence, scientific studies, etc., yes or no, but then really breaking down what those claims mean. So this was great. I think this is I've learned more about air dried dog food than the last,
Well, like
you
I
know,
said, if they come on, I would welcome the opportunity to
yeah,
talk to these people about
if
what
there's
that. It's
more to
just like,
learn, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it's just one of these things where it's like, if I were a betting man, like, you look at the website, and it's like, for this being the main selling point, the gently air dried, if you really want to, if that's a big thing, and you really believe that's revolutionary, like a big revolutionary thing, it's like, explain what it is. Like, there's no explanation. It's not like they have a picture of a fan so that you get a general feeling of like, oh, that seems very gentle. One fan is so gentle, but nobody said, like, when we describe it, I try to give people a sense of the scale and the actual temperatures and like what the process looks.
It's
And
still an
so
industrial product. at the
Yeah.
end of the
Oh
day.
yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
still made in a commercial, right, a commercial building with commercial equipment. It's not right. It's not a old rotary fan from 1950, but it's not to make fun of it. It's just it's good branding. It's just we really kind of broke down the facts from what we could find. But yes, absolutely. Like if someone from Sundays wants to come on the Feed Your Dog Facts podcast, we are more than open to additional discussion on this. This is what we could find on their website, as well as, online resources, all of the things. But anyway, well, thank you
Anyway.
for going through
Well,
another
thank
label
you.
review. We'll keep you posted
Absolutely.
on the next brand.
Absolutely.
But
You're
if
the
you
one that had to
have,
wake up early.
yeah, I know.
4 o'clock here.
Poor Dan. He's our world traveler. But if you
I'm on
have
my
any,
one vacation a year. Yeah,
right,
world
it's one
traveler.
vacation a year. That's true. That's fair. That's fair. But if you have, as a listener, any brands you would like us to do, please reach out. Please contact us. It's just hello@feedyourdogfacts.com. And that is our general email and intake that we take on all of your comments. If you have additional information, if you want us to discuss certain issues, topics on this podcast, please let us know. We are open. Thank you for
If
listening.
somebody from Sundays sends us an email on that, if you don't want to appear on the show, if you want to put it together some kind of written thing, we will read it word for word. Promise you every word of it on the show. If you
Yeah,
feel like we're
absolutely.
misrepresenting your product, 100%.
Yeah, we believe in transparency. We believe in information first. So we're open. Well, thank you for listening. And until next time.
Take care, everybody.